Welcome to the Filmmakers Playbook. My name is Jason Branagan and this is a podcast all about filmmaking. On today's show, I talk to producer John Wallace. John's credits include acclaimed feature films like Rialto, Lola, Ballywalter and Songs for While I'm Away. His TV credits include dramas such as Redemption, Too Good to Be True and the upcoming Dead and Buried. In our conversation, we discuss how he became a producer, the importance of reflection, learning to understand the why behind a no, working between documentary and drama, first-time feature filmmakers, and more. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Thank you for listening. John Wallace, thanks so much for joining me.
My pleasure, Jason.
Very much looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, no, I'm a fan of the show.
Brilliant. To begin, I was going to ask, your bio on the Cowtown website says that you graduated from commerce in UCD and then started working as an AD. And I was curious as to how commerce led to ADing.
That's a good question. When I was in UCD, there was a Conor McPherson film shooting in the college and I was an extra and I started chatting to one of the trainee ADs and I said I'd love to be an AD, not really knowing what an AD does. And that was, then I did some work experience on it as an AD, and I really enjoyed it. It was a real buzz. So, I think that was maybe my second year of a 3-year course. And I was involved in Film Society and in UCD. And so I saw ADing as a route to, I wasn't going to go to film school. I don't come from an arts, my parents are in business, you know what I mean? It's, that was never kind of on my radar to go to film school, or an art school. And I really enjoyed those couple of days I did ADing. And then I read a book about producing. I was interested, I was doing obviously business, but I was interested, I think, generally in business and creatives, and how those two mix together, and I've always enjoyed creative people and their company. So I read a book by Christine Vachon, producer with Killer Films, and she was on about, she used to be a second AD, or I was like, oh, okay. That was a way to make money and be in the industry and learn by doing, and I thought I would be much better off learning by doing than going more academic route, because I never wanted to be a director or a writer. I was always interested in more the producing end of stuff.
You mentioned that you were involved in the film soc and that while you weren't maybe interested in becoming a director or a writer, you had this interest in film. So I was wondering where that interest came from. Was that just watching movies as a kid, or were there any kind of big cinematic moments in your life that kind of led you to that interest in movie making?
I consumed movies, but also movies. Yeah, I lived in the countryside and going to the cinema was an event. It just wasn't, I had to talk my parents into bringing us in and they were great. Or, you'd get a weekly video rental. So it wasn't like it is now, kind of 24/7 available. I remember being quite young and watching, like seeing or stumbling across behind the scenes of two, like it might have been one of the Superman movies, and then that movie was on straight after, and I was like, wow, and I definitely remember seeing the making of Aliens at some stage, and then that movie being on again pretty much straight after. I was way too young, but so I think seeing that glimpse of behind the scenes, and that people do this, and
I was initially going to ask them what prompted the move from ADing into producing, but it seems like you were already thinking of producing. Yes. By the time you were ADing.
Yeah.
When then did you know it was the right time to try and start producing?
I was trying to produce the whole time I was ADing. And I started off, like, I remember meeting, production trainee or production assistant on maybe the second job I did. And they had a script and they had a little bit of money, and I produced that. Like I physically produced it, that short, and that was quite early on. So I very much, not that you don't go into these jobs going, hey, I want to be a producer, da da da. But it's talking to other trainees and other assistants and making friends with them, and you'll find they want to be a director, or they have a script, or they want to act, and I wanted to produce, so that was the game plan early on. Just start working, doing that. And so I was doing training AD stuff. Then I was you know, you might do that for 9 months of the year and then do your mate's short in January, February, and then off you go again. So, and out of that, the first feature came, was working with PJ Dillon and Alex Jones, who was a third AD, who was my boss, when I was a trainee. So building those relationships was very much part of the plan, I think. So then it was just, as often is, like, practically, how do you, like, once you get into being a trainee and you put in your years and hours into that, and you go up a grade and then you go up another grade, then it's hard to make that decision because you're earning decent money and you have a career trajectory. And then it's like stepping away from that and reestablishing yourself as something new. And that's, but I wanted that. Do you know what I mean? And I think I took a very, I wasn't a great AD. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed very much the people I was working with, but I don't think I was a great AD, but I don't think I was a very good producer either. It's where my interest was. And it was, I think the earlier you start, making low budget short films is great because you can make cheap mistakes. You make the mistakes and you move on.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about shorts and about features, but as you mentioned PJ's feature, Rewind, and working with Alex Jones on that, knowing Alex also stepped up from ADing, how do you think ADing prepared you for the world of producing, or did it?
Oh, I think it definitely did. I mean, it's just one way, coming from crew, it's just one way into producing. So there's certain skills or, knowledge and contacts you take from that world about, how a set is run, scheduling, and how to read a script in a different way. There is totally a set of skills and knowledge that you can take from whatever world you're coming from. But then when you get into it, it's just, you might know one aspect of it quite well or from your previous life, but there's so much to learn, which is quite exciting. So yeah, it definitely prepared me certain elements and certain production elements, but then there's so much to learn about the business and about development and finance and post-production, and marketing and sales and, so much.
Without getting into the weeds of short filmmaking too much, you touched on it a moment ago, and the ability of making cheap mistakes if you're making low budget shorts with friends and stuff. You made some really successful shorts, Runners, which won an IFTA with Robin Ronan Burke and Pierce Ryan. How did making those shorts begin to bridge some of the knowledge gaps that you had moving into producing from IDing, or were there big learnings and big lessons that went with making shorts and then gradually making slightly bigger shorts as you went as well?
Just every time you're trying to do a better job, so I look back on each job I do, every job I do now, okay, what could we have done differently in this situation? What's the lessons from this process, from this job? So every time you're going out, I think you're looking back on something, okay, well, I'd have done this, could have done that, differently. And then sometimes you're just dealt a hand, be it financial, logistical, whatever comes up on the day. So, I think there's always little things that you're trying to consistently build on, but I also find I was in my 20s making short films. I was taking things more personally. I was like taking no's quite personally, or somebody doesn't want to work with us. And it's like I have to learn to get over that. You know what I mean? And it's, I think the biggest lesson I've learned, what I try is to be objective. Try to put myself in somebody else's shoes. Um, so there is definitely the practical, logistical, creative, technical lessons that you're learning as you go on along. But I think there is also you just developing as a person and your understanding of the job, And I think I didn't really, it took me a long time, I think, to understand really what a producer does. Maybe I'm still trying to figure it out. But I think with those shorts, it's you're trying to go, okay, you're trying to get into a festival, or you're trying to get an award, or you're trying to, just get attention to the project and to the team. But honestly, I've learned more from doing features than shorts, because features, it's just realer in terms of the stakes are higher, more contact with the market.
There's a couple of things I would love to touch on and ask you about. The first one is, I love that you said, with each project, you're looking back on it saying, what could we have done different, or what could we have done better? And my question about that is that part of your process, let's say, where it's an active reflection process? Would you journal, or is that just something you sit down and kind of think about in terms of a debrief after a project?
I don't journal. I have a notebook, that I would put, okay, lessons from this job. Do this worked, this didn't, could have done this, blah, blah. So yeah, I actively do that. And I might do that as I go along, and then I might look back on that and go, okay, I would agree with that. I don't agree with my thinking there. I'm interested in process. So it's just making that better. But every project is different. You can't go into something with a rigid mindset way. This is the way it's going to be, and this is because you're dealing with people and various experiences, and what might work for one job won't work for the other. But then there's other like good practices that help things along, and the industry is evolving and getting better and better. So it's a bit of both.
Hey, I love it. I think it's great. I think looking back on what worked and what didn't is a really important part of just being able to distill your own thinking. As you said, though, even if you still need to be highly adaptable, because everything will be different.
Yeah, and that's exciting, and that's attractive, about the industry, and it's not the same. We don't go into the same office every day and meet the same people and come across the same problems. There's always a different, time, money, script, talent. It's always different. Time of year, COVID, non-COVID. These are all exciting challenges. And I think for me, recognizing that a big part of producing is problem solving and embracing that. When a problem comes along, here's an opportunity. And that was definitely a learning curve for me. In that, there is a lot of I don't know if joy is the right word, but like satisfaction in seeing a creative or logistical problem solved.
Touching on that idea of problem solving, you mentioned you were learning what a producer does, and I've asked this question a couple of times, where I'm curious about how people think about their roles, because I think certain jobs on film sets can sometimes be a little ill-defined, and depending on how much money there is, you may have to dig in elsewhere. I was wondering how you think of yourself as a producer now, or what do you think of as the job description of a producer?
I would think of myself as a facilitator, part of a team of facilitators in terms of facilitating the writer, the director, the cast, the HODs to do their best work. That sounds a little bit pompous, but you want to set a tone, or aspire to set a tone and a way of working that people can feel that they can do good work. Do you know what I mean? And that it's a safe environment, and that they are being listened to, and that we're all in it together, and that we will do the best version of this project, of the script. We'll do the best, or we will work towards to finding the best version of it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's quite broad, but
no, it's actually, I don't think it's pompous, and it's because I often think of a director's role in the same sense as being a facilitator of getting other people to do really good work. And when Megan was on, who directed Too Good to Be True, she said something similar, which was the idea of, I think so many HODs, your job is almost like curator of talented people, and then creating a space where they can all go and do really good work.
Yeah, I mean, that's putting together a team of people is an exciting part of the job. Having those conversations, who's available, who have you worked with before, that's exciting. And I think what I look, you look for people who are going to be excited to be on it as well, and sometimes that's hard. They've got other jobs, or there's other money involved, and that's all understandable,
When it came then to stepping up to features, what was that process like for you? Or was it a challenge for you to move into that role in terms of accessing financing and getting people to trust in your ability to produce a feature when you had been coming off shorts?
I was very lucky that Catalyst, the Rewind was produced through the first Catalyst, so we didn't have to go out and raise money. Do you know what I mean? We put it in, we pitched. There's X amount of money there, so that was great because that saves a lot of time. You know what I mean? So much of it, and like moving from shorts to features. Like I remember Rewind, it was just a big learn. Like the production was fine. Like that was myself and Alex and PJ. We knew that. The biggest learning curve I think was post. Because we had very little experience of post, and post is, you can make such a difference with post and doing it correctly. And I remember PJ was editing it in his kitchen. I don't think he'll do that again. Because that's but you learn. And what I'm really proud about that film, and we did the best that we could with what we knew at the time. I didn't have a great understanding of the marketplace, of how festivals worked, how distribution worked. We actually distributed the film ourselves here in Ireland, but we just, PJ just kept at it. He didn't give up on the film. We went back. We shot twice, I think. And that's great value. Going back and reshooting things, and I don't know, but like I would encourage you, if you can go back and shoot another day and correct things, great. It'll just make the project better. So that was a big learning curve post, and from moving from short films, it's just a different thing, making a feature, and posting a feature and understanding how that works, and then just festivals and getting it out there and the international marketplace, and where that film is within everything else. And again, like, just it's not taking things personally, but you still have to push really hard, and you have to still, it's about energy as well at the end of the day, and it's having a mental energy and a physical energy to get things done. No is the normal. And I guess those first features, you've got the blinkers on to getting it done. And I probably know more now about the marketplace and what the market will like and or not like, but how it works. So I'm probably, another big learning curve for me was just listening, like not taking stuff personally and just listening to people's response and taking stuff on board more, whereas I think maybe when I was starting out and coming from shorts to features, I was just so determined, that I wasn't. And, so.
I love what you said a moment ago, which is no is the normal. I think it's a great way of putting it. I was going to maybe just dig into what you were talking about there just a little bit in terms of not taking things personally and how you build, I guess, tenacity and resilience in this industry. Because as objective as you can be, I think producers, writers, directors, actors, crew face an onslaught of no's generally. And for you, did it just come with time, or were there things that kind of happened or experiences you had that maybe made it easier for you to begin to detach in that way?
It's why did you get a no, right? It's asking why is that not, is it just a taste thing that's not for that person? Is it where they are in their lives and what's going on there? And that's fine as well, why are we getting a no? What's not working here? And it's the quicker you can put yourself on the other side of the table and in their shoes and kind of look at stuff and find out for why it didn't. And it sucks. It still sucks, but yeah, for me, it's a remembering why, when I get a no, why, and then listening, really actively listening to, and I think a lot of us maybe we're given negative feedback and you want to push back against it. And I think it's quite human and natural. And it's just, and sometimes that feedback can be delivered in certain ways that probably aren't conductive, but that's experience, isn't it? And that's getting a little bit older for me anyway,
I think that tracks though as well, that the more of the no's that you can take, the easier they get in a sense.
Yeah, you don't want them to be too easy. Do you know what I mean? And I think that you're taking lessons from previous, like let's say you get turned down on an application, right? Why did you get turned down on that application? Was it the notes, the budget, so it's just taking lessons from before and applying that now. And I think if you can early on, even before you go into an application, and look at your application objectively and go, what is the weakness here? And address that weakness yourself, address that as if you're on the other side. Where is the flaws in this, or what's, what can I shore up in another way? It's just trying to think a few steps down the road.
Yeah, I really like the idea of trying to put yourself on the other side of the table. And also the idea of trying to understand the why is really important. I think it can probably be difficult because there's so much material going in for whether it's funding deadlines or festivals that it's so rare to actually be able to get some sort of understanding of what that why is. So being able to maybe do that self-reflectively is an interesting challenge, I suppose.
And I always look for feedback when we get turned down, and sometimes not possible, when you'll get a nice email, and sometimes, people can give you great candid feedback, and that's a great opportunity.
That ties in maybe a little bit to something I want to get to, but before I do, I just wanted to touch on your docs. Yeah. So Showrunners, Des Doyle Showrunners was the first documentary you produced, I think.
I did a documentary before that with friends of mine about the Golan Heights, and Keith Walsh and Jill Beardsworth. and it was a lovely, beautiful documentary. There are two filmmakers from the west of Ireland who do these beautiful documentaries, and they were friends of mine as well from my crew days. But that was an interesting one because that was already kind of set up, and those guys just brought me in to kind of close the finance, and it was set up as a co-production. But then Des as showrunners, Des presented it as at a showcase, I think, and then I think Alan put him in touch with me. Yeah, that was, docs are great. Docs are just a great learning opportunity of.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to dig into, which was what was the process of producing, or how is the process of producing documentaries then different than drama?
I think it depends on the doc, right? The type of doc. Is it a historical doc? Is it live unfolding? What's the subject matter? With Apples of the Golden, that was really created in the edit and finding the stories from the footage that they had shot. Des showrunners was much more, I would say, maybe academic in terms of analyzing the industry. So it's more post heavy in general, I would say. It's maybe a little bit more fluid. Like with Phil Lynott documentary, Emer had very clear vision, an outline, a very clear conceptual approach early on. So I would say that was really a filmmaker bringing a vision and an approach to treat a subject matter. Whereas with showrunners, Des was doing this amazing job getting these interviews, getting great footage, and then it was just like figuring it out in post, but actually all those filmmakers had, a vision going into it of what they wanted it to look like and feel,
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question, but I mean, like with docs generally, it's lower budgets, funding's more piecemeal, but at the same time, you have a more specific target audience than you do with dramas, unless it's a very specific genre.
When you produced The Eighth and Songs for While I'm Away, and you're doing these very big seminal Irish documentaries, I feel, was there ever any kind of, are you daunted by maybe going in and trying to tell some of those stories?
With The Eighth, I co-produced that. That's really Alan's baby, and I was, and kind of Alan was the lead for Cowtown with that. With the Phil Lynott documentary, no, it was just exciting, and I was like, I can't believe I get this opportunity to be involved with this project, because I was a big fan, and yeah, like it was hard, it was very low budget, there was a lot to it, but when you have a filmmaker who has a vision, it's great.
Has documentary taught you anything that you kind of subsequently brought into drama?
I think I brought more maybe drama ideas. Like I remember doing a Eurodoc, and because I've been used to the American and English way of financing things, whereas the European docs were a lot of soft money. So I think it's actually the other way around. Drama helped me with docs, and I'm sure there's things that I took out of docs into drama, but I just because I came from drama first, there's certain things that I would have brought into, I think, approaches that I would have brought into looking at docs. Maybe it's just more practical production stuff.
In terms of what you're bringing from drama into documentary, potentially, you mentioned maybe some production stuff. Are you thinking in terms of narrative then as well, or like construction of what that doc looks like?
Yeah, and editorially, like, do you know what I mean? It's all storytelling, there's totally crossover there between the two and what you can do. And I mean, it's There's so many transferable skills across it. I just think when I kind of came from drama and I'd done 2 or 3 features before I started into the doc world, I naturally was looking at it through those eyes.
When you were talking about dealing with the now and trying to understand the why and then trying to fix something for the next time around, this is a question that we can talk about in doc terms or drama terms. But I was wondering, as a producer then, when it comes to, I don't want to say fixing problems, but looking at scripts or looking at edits, how are you kind of guiding the creative and the narrative and that world of things along?
I don't know if I'm guiding so much as I'm there to support and be a sounding board, and I think that goes back to early conversations with the filmmaker about what's the creative ambition and what's the North Star for this project. It's about understanding what that is, honestly, be honest with yourself that's what excites you and you want to buy into that as well, and that you're curious about that. Then I think it's remembering that, and retaining that and understanding that as you go through the process, So when a filmmaker comes to you with a problem, or, you can understand, or you can remember the why. Why are we doing this? What's the goal? And likewise, it's maybe reminding that filmmaker sometimes, because they're so in the detail, what the original goal was. Has that shifted? I don't think so much guiding as being, again, facilitating and being a sounding board. And the best experiences have been where, you've been on that same page with the filmmaker from the start. You've both worked really hard to get there, and you've been through the ups and downs, and you've been in the trenches together to get there, and they can look back at the other end of it and go, okay, well, we did everything that we could, to get there.
Yeah. So it sounds like then, as you said, you use that word kind of facilitator again, but you're also kind of there as like a touchstone or a touch point where it's like maintaining this broader perspective on the project as a whole, as opposed to necessarily getting down into the weeds yourself.
Yeah, you got to get down in the weeds as well yourself, but it's the challenge is to retain that view from a height as well, because there is the practical day-to-day, there is figuring out those problems in the weeds. There is that, and it's like, if I'm doing my job well, I think I'm a good sounding board. I'm positive. I'm helpful. that you can bring, because I think for a filmmaker it can be a very very lonely journey. And I might be working on 2 or 3 things. They're just working on that, and that's filling their days. And I'm talking maybe more specifically in post, because I think post can be really the toughest part, in one sense.
When you talk about post being tough, what exactly do you mean?
The tough thing about post, I think, is the energy levels and the concentration levels. You've been at the end of this long journey and you have what you have, and yes, you can pick up stuff and that, but it's just, I think there's a certain mental toughness that's required for a filmmaker to get through post and stick at it and get the best version of it, and I think it can be, especially for a first-time filmmaker, I think it can be very, maybe traumatic is maybe too big a word, but it can be tough because there's the film in their head and then there's what we achieved, so I think post can just be very tough in that. And then also there can be very tight post schedules, and posts you're rewriting again. So it just needs time, especially for a first time filmmaker, who hasn't been through that process before. And then I think if you haven't been through that process before and you haven't seen the effects of sound editing and music and all these things that will come towards the end. And then also I think it's nerve-wracking as well, for you're getting all this feedback. This is your film, it's here, it's no longer it's real, it's in the can. So I think mentally, emotionally, I think that can be a tough process starting out for a filmmaker, for a filmmaking team. But there are so many things that you can fix in post. There are so many things that you can make better in post. Doing pickups, music can elevate. Sound design, all these things.
And I suppose the joy about being able to pick things up is exactly what you need to make it better as well now.
Exactly. What a gift.
Yeah.
So I think it's having hope all the way through post. And I'm sorry, I'm being very just first time filmmaking, first features focused. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, that's a question I was going to ask you about, because you've worked with a lot of first time feature filmmakers in Prasanna, Ballywalter, Andrew, Lola, Robin Ronan, when you guys did Standby together. That was their first feature. I was going to ask you, one of the phrases I've often heard about first time feature directors is this sense of there's a lot more heavy lifting, which makes sense because the marketplace doesn't know a director, so it's probably harder to finance. So I was curious about, in your experience, what are the pros and cons of working with first time feature directors?
It's their first film. They've been thinking about it for a long time. They've been writing, a lot. You have the advantage of that they've had a lot of time to think about it. And they generally have a very clear vision of what they want to do. And that's great. And they have an energy and enthusiasm. I think also it's recognizing what the budget is going to be. I think one of the smartest things we did on Andrew's film, Alan and Andrew and I, we were setting it up as a co-pro, and it was going to be a 3-5 million film. And we recce'd, I think it was Belgium, and we came back and we were like, let's just make it at home. Let's just pull in favors. Let's just shoot it with people we know and locations that we know with the money that we have, And I think that kind of with a first time feature, it's just like, what do we have? Let's just do it, and recognizing early on what those resources are and going after that and trying to do the best job you can with that, and I think there's a certain freedom and energy to that. I think sometimes you can get trapped up in, trying to put together, it's hard to put together something that's above 1.5 million and without stars, and then you get into a waiting game and that. And whereas with a first time feature, there's a certain excitement around it.
Sounds very much like what we hear about musicians or bands and their first album.
Right. Yeah.
It's great. I never actually thought of it that way, but it's a great way to think about it. I was going to ask you then, and this is not necessarily in relation to first time filmmakers, anyone you've worked with, you kind of mentioned in post and the notes process, and I was wondering how you deal with having to give notes, be that at script stage or at post stage, and have those conversations.
So it's different for every writer and director and producer, and there's some writers that I have a relationship where they want me to be really direct with my feedback. And there's other writers where I would be, I do this actually with the writers, all of them, but like what I love in the script, what's working, what's great, and I think I've learned, I hope, to, that my, the areas that I'm not sure of, that I'm not it's not that it's a question, for me, because I don't know the answer to it, but it's often my the areas in a script or in a cut that may not be working for me. It's like, well, is it working for you? Do you know what I mean? Is what's, it could be a tonal thing. It could be just clarity around the story. So I try and tailor my feedback to who it is. You know what I mean? Because some people will want their feedback in a certain way. I want, I think it's very important to be positive and what are the things that are really working and that you like about it, and it's subjective. It is subjective, it's to try and be helpful, and constructive. But I've had to learn to do that as well, and I'm still learning to do that. And I find working in development, working with a great script editor can be, I don't come from a script background. Get a good script editor on board. They are worth their weight in gold. They're just super, super smart, and you will appreciate them. The writer will appreciate them. So
I enjoy working with script editors, but recently I've done this thing where instead of working with one person having one perspective, having multiple people's perspectives. And I thought that was a really interesting process.
right. Yeah.
Because at least initially you're able to identify all of the kind of consistent things that people are throwing up.
Yeah.
So you can kind of distill, well, that's not subjective. Everyone has
I think that's a really good tip, and I think it's finding people collaborators that you recognize and appreciate their taste. I think starting off especially, it's like, do you enjoy the same movies and books? And, I think that's important.
What for you, or in your opinion, is the hardest part of being a producer?
I think raising money is the hardest part. And I think it's 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 filling in, it's the applications to the various funding bodies can be, and the reporting and all of that can be quite time consuming, and it's away from, sometimes it's necessary. It is what it is. Raising money is hard, I think. And my ambition is to do bigger budget films. So that can be hard,
Do you think at the moment that it is getting harder to raise money?
No, I think there's always loads of, I think it's putting together a package that is meaningful and will attract finance, so that is a really compelling script, a filmmaker to go with that, and a cast, and getting those elements together and keeping those elements together.
What is your favorite part of being a producer?
I mean, there's loads, in development. I think it's just seeing a script get better. To see a writer solve a problem. It's just great when a writer gets a note and they go away, but they've not only taken that note, but they've elevated it. They've made it even better, or they've figured something out. So just watching that, being those conversations, that's great. And seeing that process, of material get better and better, yeses are always good, when, and I think that's when you're, a writer, director, producer, you huddle down and the next draft is better, and then you send that out and other people think it's good as well. That's a great feeling, I think when finance is raised, or you've just, it's a lovely feeling when you and the other producers and the director and writer are all just on the same page, and you're in prep and things are it's the closing of finance, the casting of a role, the crewing up, the selection of a location. That's they're all little wins, if they're done well, and it's the right. So I mean, it's solving problems, isn't it? And then I kind of quite enjoy maybe after the first week, and it's things have kind of settled down, and things are going well, and that's just, it's just really nice rocking up to a set, and there's a good atmosphere and people are happy. That's that's good, and and good work is being done. So yeah, I could go on. There's always, and it's the same in the edit. Like when problems are solved, and you can see a cut getting progressively better and better. Or you're in a mix, or you're in a grade, and that can be really just a really nice feeling being there with the filmmaker and all the work that's been put in. And yeah,
I love that answer because it basically sounds like you love the entire
I
process,
do.
which
I
is
do.
great.
Yeah, I'm so lucky. You know.
So, in terms of process, I guess, I think we live in a world where everyone wants hacks and everyone wants to get where they're going really quickly, but it takes time, particularly in this industry. That said, I think we can often look back and see things maybe that we would have done a bit differently that potentially would have cleared a path in one direction or another a little bit sooner. So I was going to ask if you have any examples of setbacks or mistakes or things that you reflect on and think, I would have done that differently, and maybe that would have just helped me take 2 steps instead of 1 at a particular career stage.
That's a great question. Yeah, loads. I mean, I couldn't give an example of any one thing, but again, it's like, it's learning. It's just constantly learning, and you learn more from your mistakes. And I make so many mistakes, you know. So, and that could be, that could be choices. That could be how you handled a situation. I don't think there was ever one crossroads where I went, oh, do this or do that. I think it's just been a longer, slower thing where I've been developing as a person, I've been developing as a producer, and I don't, no, there's none I could go, well, if I hadn't have done, I kind of, I kind of have the attitude that, okay, I was supposed to learn something out of this experience. So when something doesn't work out, when a project doesn't work out, I was supposed to learn something from the decision making on that, and around that, and why I made that decision, and what was the framework around that, So I feel like it's just loads of little things all the time, and then, and it's just learning how you react to situations, how you handle certain situations, how you read certain situations. Yeah. So I think hopefully I'll just keep learning, and I think when what we're kind of talking about as well is project selection, choice of projects, and I think that goes back to, it just can't be financial. And when I've made decisions purely financially, they haven't worked out. When I've made decisions, finance is part of it, but also personalities and subject matter and challenges within that project, when they've been a big part of it, then it's always worked out better.
I love that mindset idea. It sounds very much like growth mindset and this process of just continually learning. And I think if ever anyone gets to a point in life where they have ceased learning, it's for any aspiring producers or people looking to produce features or television, which we didn't even get to touch on. But I was going to ask you, what would one piece of advice be that you would give them?
My advice would be, if you're starting out in the industry, there's no one route into it. I came from the crew world, and that's how I made my contacts. If you come from a business world there's no route. It's an entrepreneurial business. So I think the most important thing is to go out and give it a crack, give it a shot. And that's, the only way you learn. What if your low budget, if your feature is not getting financed at this level, okay, put it in the drawer. There is less finance available to you. Can you get a script that will work for that level? But I think it's always, I think you always have to be trying to move forward and working. Work generates work, and getting on with people. You get on by getting on with people as well. So I don't think there is any mad secret, it's like any other industry, work generates work, get on by getting on, and it's just about learning and learning from your mistakes and picking yourself up and going on to the next thing,
Yeah.
and that's the quicker you can pick yourself up from your failure, and move on to the next one, the better off you'll be, but that's easier said than done, right?
It can be, but I think, the more people I talk to for the podcast, and I think if you look outside of film and television, all success is built on failures. If you're not failing, you're not learning.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I was going to ask, when you first moved into television, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your first show, I think, was Redemption, which was 2020.
Yeah.
Did television hit you as a different beast than feature filmmaking?
Slightly, yeah, slightly. I love television. It's great, and it's more, look, I'm coming from low budget feature films, a lot of first time directors, art house festival films. It's just a bigger. It feels like a bigger beast. You know what I mean, in a good way. The thing I love about TV is the immediacy of it. It's going to be on air in 6 months. With features, you're waiting for a festival. With independent, low-budget features, you're waiting for a festival selection. You're waiting for a distributor to pick it up. And, a year, 2 years can go by very quickly. Television is just much quicker, and that's great. And I think it's also just the opportunity. It's more hours, you know what I mean? You're telling a story over 6 or 8 hours or 4 hours, whatever it is. So there's a bigger machine to feed in terms of story, exploring worlds. Yeah.
We spoke about the joy of being able to maybe go and pick things up in features. If you're in the edit and you need something, you might have a day of pickups and you can get exactly what you want. That doesn't always exist in television. So how does that change your role as a producer in terms of maybe being on set and just making sure everything has to be in the can? You have to complete your days. You have to complete the schedule.
I'm lucky I've worked with some great directors, and great editors as well. And so as we're shooting, it's been assembled and there's constant conversation. So we can pick stuff up during the course of production, and also, there's a bit of a brain trust as well on television, more, the exec producer's more, whereas in features, the exec producer could be a financier or somebody who maybe developed the script. It's more, whereas with television, exec producers can be quite hands-on. So there's more of a brain trust there, and often that exec producer is the person who started the conversation with the writer, who found the idea. And so they know the history of the project. And I've learned so much from, strong executive producers in television who, are just so smart and who can elevate a project, So, there's definitely, no, we certainly haven't gone back and done any pickups but we've done GVs and we've done little bits. Yeah, it's all, doable.
Different solutions to the same problems, I suppose.
Yeah.
In terms of execing versus producing, I know you were an executive producer on King of the Travelers, and I was wondering how your role then, you touched on it there, but just, I guess, how that role separates in terms of when you exec a project versus when you produce it.
I mean, with features, with King of Travelers, I was, that Cormac Fox put that finance together, and I think honestly, I was just helping Cormac close the finance, and Cormac was the day-to-day producer on it. And he's a great guy to work with. So it was just helping Cormac, do what he didn't have time or reach to. You're a part of a team. I haven't been an executive producer in television. It's a very different, it's a different role, I feel. but I'm quite enjoying just being a series producer in television. That's yeah.
In terms of, I'm jumping around a little bit now,
Go for it, man.
but we had touched on the idea of project selection. What it is, what you learned about picking projects for different reasons. And I was wondering, as a producer then, how do you vet projects when they do come to you? Or how do you make your choices? Are you predominantly looking for like an immediate personal connection that you can live with this project for the next couple of years? Or do you think there's a place in the market for this, so that's a good reason? Or is it kind of an amalgam of criteria?
With features, it's kind of really relationships. You know what I mean? The features that I have in development come out of, I'm just thinking, just going through the slate in my head, they've all come out of pre-existing relationships with somebody I've worked with in television, or another producer, or, a writer that we've developed something before and it didn't work out and we're trying this, or it's, you like somebody's previous work, they have an idea you're interested in, you start the conversation, and it's kind of getting to know them. So with features, I feel like there's the personal connection of somebody you've worked with before, you can work with. But also I think I look at the feature, the script, and how much that will cost to make. What will we need to get that over the line? Is it cast driven? Is it concept driven? Is it filmmaker driven? There's a couple of different frames there. I don't want to spend, and I don't want to do it again, is spend a lot of time developing stuff that is a long shot to get financed in terms of budget level. So I'm trying to match what I can raise in the marketplace with that script idea. So it's, and again, and it's just that conversation of, what will be more expensive and what will be tougher to get off the ground, and it's what's that filmmaker's wheelhouse and where they're coming from.
Yeah. Okay.
That's for features. With television, I mean, I'm going for hire. I'm developing stuff as well, but again, it's a lot of it is pre-existing relationships. And do you get on with that person? Have you had a good experience with them? You have to take risks though as well, and that's, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And that's part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's, I guess it's, the something like a short or a commercial, or there are nice ways in to quickly figure out whether you would enjoy working with that person or not.
Yeah. You have participated in Berlinale Talents. I guess in a world where there is a lot of talent labs and festivals running talent programs, I was wondering, would you recommend those talent programs for aspiring producers?
What I would recommend for aspiring producers, is doing AAVE, or a kind of more of a year-long course, AAVE or ACE, or I did Eurodoc, I did Inside Pictures, and they're, so it's kind of hard when it's just like a weekend or a couple of days, and it's good to do something outside of your country. It's good to do something that's maybe over 2 or 3 workshops, just in terms of, your contacts, your network, but also your peers. It's often people at the same level as you're at, and that's when it's worked best for me. When I've got the most out of those courses is when it's producers from other countries who are at a similar stage in their career, or at similar maybe crossroads in their choices, because you can talk quite openly and freely about where you're at and the challenges in your country, or you'll find they'll have the same, so it's like a group therapy sometimes, those those courses, and they're great. And but also it's knowledge as well about how the industry works in a certain country and what the market is like there. And I'm a member of ACE, and it's just a great network.
When you mentioned about meeting other producers, it makes a lot of sense because you're always going to be thinking in terms of international co-production.
Yes and no, right? Because I want to find other producers that I get on with. Yes, you bring a project to one of these labs and it's like, oh, you could shoot it here and we do post there, blah, blah, but I'm there and, you have your dinners and all those kind of things and coffees and chats, and you're just trying to find like-minded people. It can be a very lonely business. So it's not just, friendships, those
community,
that community, exactly. Yeah, that's worth so much, and I think that has to, those relationships, that community, if there's a byproduct of working together, great, but that is very supportive and nourishing, I think.
Yeah, very, very true. And I think everyone kind of in the industry works in isolation until you don't, which is when you're in production or you're in prep, and it can take a long time to get there. Earlier, you mentioned a Christine Vachon book. And one of the questions I always ask, because I'm interested in it, is do you have, that book aside, any other kind of recommended resources or books or videos or anything that has influenced you or helped you on your journey?
I think when I was starting out, it was more like William Goldman and, those books about hit and run. I'm just looking at my bookshelf, actually, or, producer biographies or, books about the industry. And then I think that's when I was trying to get into it, and trying to start a career. And now it could be music, sports, it could be leadership, process. I mean, I really enjoyed Rick Rubin's book about a creative process. You don't know where you're going to get inspiration from or draw an example from, or it's podcasts or I try and probably, no, I would definitely read less kind of film books or producer books now, and it's more about just a wider range of,
I think Rick Rubin's book, great book, but I think there's as many lessons you can take from books that aren't film related.
Yes, yeah, 100%.
John Wallace, thank you very much for talking to me. I thoroughly enjoyed our chat.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jason.
And that's a wrap on John Wallace. Thank you for listening to the Filmmakers Playbook. If you're enjoying the show, please share it with a friend and follow and rate us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have feedback, questions, or topics that you'd like me to cover on the show, please put them in the comments section on our Instagram page at the Filmmakers Playbook Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at Jason Branagan Director. You can find out more about John's work at cowtownpictures.ie. Links and social media handles are in the show notes. Join me next week when I talk to director Conor Morrissey. Until next time.